Well, fall is a season for salmon runs in BC when salmon migrate from the ocean to freshwater to spawn. Early signs point to a healthy return this year. And to get a better idea, we are joined by Bob Chamberlain. He is the chair of the First Nation Wild Salmon Alliance. Bob, thank you for joining us again. And we spoke with you almost exactly a month ago, and the early returns were looking healthy. A month later, what are we seeing now?
Well, we're seeing a reduction of the run size on the Fraser River by about 60%. And at the same time, we're seeing increases of double or 60%, in the Skeena River, the Somas, and the Okanagan. Of course, the primary difference is these runs didn't have to experience the sea lice and the disease from fish farms that operate in the Discovery Islands. I think that's a really big and important piece the government is now wrapping their minds around.
How do you expect returns to look as other salmon species start their runs?
Well, I mean, this is always the mystery, is how productive is the ocean, and, are the elements of water temperature and food availability going to be there? But I think when we look at the runs that have returned, we can see that at the time of the maturation of these smolt, that they did have the appropriate food sources and water temperatures. So of course, we're always hoping for better returns, as we've been facing historic lows for the past number of years on the Fraser River.
All right, this is just 1 year, but what can you infer about the health of fish stocks?
I believe that the attention that the federal and provincial governments are giving salmon now is entirely appropriate, given the historic lows. The transition planning for the fish farm industry that the DFO is currently conducting has been problematic at the outset. I've spoken to 4 chiefs that have taken part in 3 different of these roundtables and are extremely troubled by the flavor and the direction of the questions. So I've been in contact with the senior officials in the minister's office, and I'm grateful to report that they are reviewing all the documents that are being used in this important and critical work in order to ensure that the path forward is consistent with the mandate letter that the DFO minister has from Prime Minister Trudeau.
And what sort of indicators are you watching for?
Well, I'm wanting to see some really clear questions that can't be manipulated in the end. A very clear question: do you support fish farms being in the ocean or not? And the way that I'm seeing it now with the documents that are being reviewed is I've been referring to them as buffalo jump questions, or ones that are very leading and steering towards an enhanced regulation. And the science is in. We know beyond doubt that there is an impact to wild salmon. And of course, the 9 science papers that DFO stands on for less than minimal risk or harm to Fraser sockeye are coming from the Canadian Science Advisory Secretariat, which has been harshly criticized by scientists that actually participated in most of those science papers.
All right, well, the DFO is in the process, we've talked about a little bit, of consulting about transition away from open net pen salmon farming. Can you go into a little bit more about how would you describe the consultations so far?
Well, we've seen documents where that word you mentioned, "from," is actually absent. And when you have a long experience of dealing with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and how they interpret things in a way that meets their existing mandates, which of course is to promote the industry. So when we see questions that are not fulsome and very direct in seeking the response from Canadians and First Nations, it's very troubling. Because what we're seeing and witnessing is that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans in the Pacific region is developing their own path in terms of transition, and it's not consistent with the minister's direction. And this is consistent with the same behaviors that we saw during the Discovery Islands consultations and what appeared in the court documents as a part of the judicial review ruling.
One of the objectives of the DFO consultation is trust. How would you describe the state of trust in the different sectors involved in BC's salmon industry?
The Department of Fisheries and Oceans has not earned any trust nor respect from the majority of First Nations across British Columbia. The disappointments in implementing the Sparrow decision to management, and when you have access to thousands of documents from the ATIP process where you can see the internal communications, it becomes very clear that this department is steering towards a path and have been down this path that is not consistent with the primary objectives of looking after the environment and wild salmon, whether it's recharacterizing science by omission or just pretending to do things that are appropriate. It's all proven through the internal communications, and this should be a very deep concern for the Prime Minister, for the Minister of Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and Canadians in general.
All right, we got 20 seconds left, but I just wanted to ask you on with the farms on the Discovery Islands, a final decision is expected in early January 2023. Do you think that will come in time?
Well, it is going to be useful if it's going to be like, because the farms are not operating now. So that's a really good thing for the next round of out-migrating wild salmon. So, I mean, if they're not removed, that is removing a very critical bottleneck. But we have to consider the entire east coast of Vancouver Island, as 90% of the sockeye and all the salmon that come out of the Fraser, 90% of them travel up the interior part of Vancouver Island.
All right, thank you so much. That is Bob Chamberlain, who's a consultant in North Vancouver.
Thank you for your time.